It's New Cycle, and boy, do I have a topic for you.
Great. What's on your mind?
Happy after the Chagim, everyone. New cycle, new Parsha, Parashat Bereshit. Last year we discussed the story of Etzadat, of the tree of knowledge, Adam and Chava eating from that tree. We'll link that video at the end of this one. This year, what I want to discuss is what happens just before that story. Because last year in the video we mentioned it's super important to understand the context in which the stories are told, to understand the sequence of events, to understand the Hebrew language the Torah uses in order to tell us these stories, because these stories are not just simple stories. They, of course, have many layers to them, but also on the most basic level, in order to understand them, you have to understand everything that goes on around those stories, all the context in which these stories are told. And the story just before Etzadat, of course, is the story when HaKadosh Baruch Hu creates the Isha, creates the woman. And of course, there are many questions to ask about the story. But first of all, above all, is why does the Torah give such a reasoning to the creation of the Isha, to the creation of the woman? What is this reasoning the Torah is giving? Because if I tell you, Itzi, why did HaKadosh Baruch Hu create the Isha? You'll tell me, well, it says in the Pasuk, Adam lo matza Ezer Kengdo. Adam HaRishon couldn't find anyone to be with. He went through all the animals around and he couldn't find anyone, and that's why HaKadosh Baruch Hu created for him the Isha. But actually, if you look in the Psukim, you'll see that just before that, the Torah already tells us that HaKadosh Baruch Hu decided lo tov vehiyot Adam levado. Just after HaKadosh Baruch Hu made him in charge of Etzadat, made him in charge of the world, leovda uleshomra, made him in charge of all these things, then HaKadosh Baruch Hu decided lo tov vehiyot Adam levado e'aseh lo Ezer Kengdo. So first of all, what is this Ezer Kengdo? What is this part of? What does it even mean to be an Ezer Kengdo? But more than that, how is the fact that Adam HaRishon is in charge of everything around him, in charge of Etzadat, how is that related to the needing an Ezer Kengdo, to the fact that he now needs someone to be with? How is the fact that he needs to leovda uleshomra, to work the land and not eat from Etzadat, how does that result in the fact that it's not good for him to be alone and he needs an Ezer Kengdo? But more than that, when you continue looking at the Psukim, first of all, when Adam HaRishon figures out that he suddenly has someone with him, he says, Zot apam. This time, it's a matzama. You took a bone from my own flesh. You took someone from my own being. Why does Adam HaRishon say, this time, Zot apam? What are any other times that we don't know about? What does it mean, Zot apam, this time? And then probably the biggest question in all of this story is the Pasuk that ends this event, a Pasuk that even the Mefarshim, Rashi, Ramban, everybody notices that it's out of place. The Pasuk of Al ken ya'azov ish et aviv ve'et imo ve'davak be'ishto v'hayu lebasar echad. That this is why a man leaves their parents and they go off and marry together, a man and a woman, and create their own family, and they become one. What is this Pasuk doing here? This is obviously not part of the story of the Bria. It's not part of the story of the creation. Again, as all the Mefarshim point out, this is a Pasuk that's really out of place. So why is it here? What is it doing here at the end of the story? So recapping of what I just said, why does the Torah bring the reasoning for creating the woman, creating the Isha? What is this reasoning about? What is the Torah trying to teach us about the relationship between a man and a woman? And how does this result in this very out of place Pasuk, Al ken ya'azov ish et aviv ve'et imo ve'davak be'ishto?
Yeah, it's very interesting. You know, if Hashem already said that he needs to create woman, why does he have to go through that process also of going and looking and meeting all the animals and only then saying, oh, he's missing an Ezer Kengdo, and then only then creating woman? We could skip those psukim and go right to the creation of the woman. But I think actually because this shows up, as you said, right after the commandment not to eat from Etzadat, to truly understand this, we have to go back to what we spoke about last year. Because without getting into too much detail, and we dive there really into the details of the Hebrew words that build up this story, but we said in general that what happened with Etzadat was, it wasn't a magical tree, but rather that was the moment when man recognized that he has choice. Until that point in time, God created everything. Everything was godly. The idea that a creation can actually do something against the will of the creator was unthinkable. And the moment that man actually went against HaKadosh Baruch Hu was the moment when he actually recognized that he has free choice, and therefore he has responsibility, and therefore he can actually both do bad but also do good. We compared it to a child or a teenager who recognizes, who goes against their parents, and at that point maybe they're doing something negative, but at the end of the day that's the moment when they become their own being, because they recognize that they are an own being. They're something that can actually do things, and therefore they can also be embarrassed, as we see, by who they are, and they can also be proud of things that they do achieve. So if eating from Etz Hadat was that moment of recognizing the free choice, the commandment of Etz Hadat is the moment that free choice was given. Because the minute HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I'm commanding you not to do something, by definition, that means that theoretically you could not listen. Otherwise, I don't need to command. If I'm commanding, I'm saying that at this moment, free choice is coming into the world. You are sort of an own being, and you should listen, but you can not listen. And therefore, you're responsible for what you do. And I think based on that context, if we see what happens here, it shines a new light. Because what Hashem says right after it, Lo tov heyot ha'adam levado. It's not good for man to be levado, to be alone. E'eselo Ezer Kengdo. And there's two parts to that. Ezer is support. Kengdo is opposite him. Maybe sometimes against him. These are two sides. I think these are two important pieces that are needed here. Because there are two things that happen the moment man becomes sort of his own entity, his own being, who can do this and can do that. There's a big danger, which is one, that he will think that he is a god, right? He has free choice. He can do what he wants. He's a god himself. And the Pasuk says, Lo tov heyot ha'adam levado. It's not good for man to be levado. There's only one einod milvado, right? Only God is levado. Man shouldn't be levado because he will lose proportions. He will think that he has the power to do anything and he will bring destruction to the world. If man has free choice, it's a wonderful thing. But for man to recognize his responsibility, recognize his place, he needs to feel that he's a part of something. He needs to feel that he's not alone, that there is an other, and only together they can achieve. And at first it's only him and his wife, but then also the whole world. We're all a part of something larger. We're part of a family. We're part of Am Yisrael. We're part of the world. When you recognize you're a part of something and only together you can achieve, then you'll truly take that power of free choice and not make you think you're a god, but actually use that free choice to choose well. But I think there's also another deeper level here, and that's the Kenegdo, opposite him. Because as we said, the moment when man recognizes that he can actually go against God is the moment when he becomes sort of his own entity. And as his own entity, now he needs to choose God. He needs to choose that relationship with HaKadosh Baruch. The same exact thing happens here, and that's hidden in the word Kenegdo. As Chazal teach us from Perek Aleph, that man and woman were created at first together, as we see in the Pasuk, that Hashem created man, female, and male. So they were there, but they were part of one. What changes now in creation is not the woman is created. She was already there. It's the fact that now they're separated into two separate entities. And again, when you're two separate entities, now you have to choose that relationship. And all of this world and all of creation is about us being able to choose the relationship, to choose the relationship with our spouse, and to choose the relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. When we recognize that on the one hand, we're lacking, we need the support, we're not complete without the other side, and also that we choose, it's our decision, it's our responsibility to make that choice, to recognize that and make that choice. This is true both with our relationship with our spouse, with our other half, and it's true also with our relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Maybe that's what happens later there with the Pasuk. When Hashem doesn't right away create the woman, he first takes him through all the other creations, and he sees all different creations, but they're not a part of him. They're not completing. They don't solve the problem. They don't become an Ezer Kengdo. He doesn't feel that he's a part and they're another part and they complete each other. And then when he sees Chava, that's the moment when he says, Zot hapam, what? Etzem atzamai. This is already a part of me. That's what I need, both for the support and both for that other side and me being able to choose that missing part. That's what I needed. Maybe this is why the Pasuk stops and goes totally out of context of the story and says, Al ken ya'azov ish et aviv ve'et imo v'davak v'ishto. Because you may think, oh, of course, Chava was actually taken out of his body and was created, and therefore he's saying, she is a part of me. Zot hapam etzem atzamayu basar mibsari. But this is only true for them, because that was the case. When I choose a wife, she's someone else. When we choose each other, we're different people. We're separate entities. We're choosing each other. We're not two parts of a whole. That's why the Torah here stops and says, listen to what Adam HaRishon says. Zot hapam etzem atzamayu basar mibsari. This is true about everyone. This is the reason Al ken ya'azov, every single couple from here on. Al ken ya'azov ish et aviv ve'et imo v'davak v'ishto. When we build a family, we're building a whole out of two parts. We're recognizing that without that whole, we're only a part. And that's how we can create a whole. And this, as we said, comes right after, as you said, the responsibility of le'ovda u'leshomra. And as we said last year, the responsibility that comes from the concept of there being free choice and me having to choose the right thing.
Very good. And like you're saying, this Pasuk of it's super important to understand that it is actually part of the Bria. It is actually part of the story of creating of man and woman, because in order to be a full person, in order to be a full human being, you need to go and find that spouse. A man needs to go find his woman. A woman needs to go find her man, and together build that entity of two, which is one. That is the way, like you were saying, in order le'ovda ve'leshomra. That is the way in order to build the world, in order to guard the world, in order to keep the world, and in order to make the world a better place. This is probably the most important message in the story over here that is very much lacking today, especially when you look in some cultures, is very missing this idea, this understanding that a connection, that a relationship between a husband and a wife is not only good for me because this is what I like, this is what I love, this is what I want, but understanding that this relationship makes me who I am supposed to be, makes me better, because that's how I develop as a person. This is how I develop as a human being. I cannot develop without that relationship. I cannot develop without being this two together as one. That's what makes me as an individual better, understanding that I'm part of a couple, understanding that I have my spouse, and together then I become a better person, then I become a better human, then I can treat the world in a better way, then I can build the world in a better way, because this is also what this concept of Ezer Kengdo is, like you were saying. Ezer Kengdo is, at first, the first human, as you were saying, was created together. Man and woman were one entity, this one entity that controlled all the world, and they were by themselves. There was nothing aside of them, opposite of them, to direct them if they're going in the right way or going in a bad way, and balance them throughout the way. They had nothing opposing them. They had nothing to help them get up if they fell, or to put them back into course if they're going off course, or to push them higher if they're climbing the right way. But now what happened was HaKadosh Baruch Hu created these two entities that they will help each other navigate the world in the right balance, in the right way. Some people think that when you have an opposition and the opposition doesn't behave in a good way, you don't have to listen to it. But that's not what the Torah says. The Torah says that when you have an entity of government, when you have an entity that operates the right way, it needs a strong, good opposition to lead it the right way, to push it back the right way, to make sure that it's walking in the right track. That's what the purpose of this Ezer Kengdo is. On the one side, helping and pushing forward. On the other side, opposing and balancing to make sure that that entity keeps its balance. And being one entity, like you were saying, was too dangerous for the world. It could lead to destruction. It can lead to a bad place. That's why HaKadosh Baruch Hu went and separated the two, so that this one entity understands that in order to be one entity, you need these two humans. You need these two beings together to help each other being this one entity. And again, this is probably the most important lesson over here in the story of Adam HaRishon, of the creation of Chava. Not necessarily the creation, but the separation, as it's discussed in Kabbalah and in many places, the separation of Adam and Chava, understanding that in essence they are one entity, lived by two beings. And again, each being individually living their life, lives their life individually, but understanding that they are one entity, understanding that there's another side with them. That's how that individual should live a life. That's how the individual develops the best way they can develop, because again, this is part of the story of creation. This is part of creation. This is how a human being is supposed to develop. And like you were saying, it's true for also all the other relationships that man and woman have, as we know from Halacha, O Chevruta O Mituta, that is brought down in the Gemara with Chonia Magel and Rava, that said the very famous quote of O Chevruta O Mituta, or you have a good Chevruta, a good person to learn with and develop with, or if you can't find that, you're better off dying alone. And as we also see the story with Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish, the great two giants in the time of the Gemara, that Rabbi Yochanan couldn't live without having Chavruza, without having Rish Lakish. And even though Rish Lakish would oppose him with many, many questions, when they brought him somebody to agree with everything he said and find even more sources to agree with what he's saying, Rabbi Yochanan couldn't have it. Rabbi Yochanan needed this Ezer Kengdo in his learning. He needed this development, this person to develop him and help him become a better person. He needed this strong opposition to what he was saying in order to be a better coalition himself, in order to be a better person himself. That's what Rabbi Yochanan needed. This is what this concept of Chevruta or Mituta is about. This is what this Ezer Kengdo is about. Understanding that if you want to develop as a human being, as a strong individual, you need that couple, you need that other side to help you develop, to help you get better, to help you grow. Understanding that this is part of the development development of the person, of the human. And again, understanding that this is part of the creation of the Sipur HaBriah, of the way a human being is supposed to develop, is finding that spouse, becoming one entity again together, and then leading their lives as two individuals, helping each other develop the best way they can develop to be this one entity within this group of entities, within this society around them, in order to make the world a better place, in order to le'ovda u'leshomra, and keep pushing the world to the ultimate good together forward.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe this is also why, one of the real chataim that Adam HaRishon did was not the fact that he ate from Etz Hadat. It's that when he was asked, why did you eat from Etz Hadat? He said, oh, she told me to. And as we explained last year, he saw himself as he was just following. Don't be a follower. I put you both as an Ezer Kengdo. You're supposed to be her support. She's supposed to be your support. Together, you will achieve better good. If you're just going to say, oh, she told me, then nothing is going to be created. We need that Kengdo, not only support each other, but also be opposition, as you said, be opposite of each other. And together, those two sides, those two entities can create a better good and a better whole. Very
good, exactly. We're out of time, so we'll have to end here. It's a very hot topic, of course, with everything that's going on in the world, especially with the Western culture, but a super important one to understand, where there are many, many opinions about marriage, not getting married and not building families, but according to our Torah, according to Yiddishkeit, this is what mankind is about. This is what man and women are about, being a one entity together, finding each other, rebuilding this one entity, because this is part of creation and this is part of developing as a human being. You want to develop as an individual, so you have to find your spouse. You have to find that one person to complete you, because as an individual, you won't be full. As an individual, you won't be whole. If you won't have that other side, the other aspect in your life, if you don't have it, you will be missing out on half of what you're supposed to be. That's what it means to get married. That's what marriage is. That's what this Pasuk of is here. This is what it is about. But again, we're out of time. We'll end here. We'll just again remind the viewers what we discussed the past couple of years. Last year, we discussed again Chet Adam HaRishon. We'll link that video. Also, the year before that, we talked about Cain and Hevel. What happened over there, the story over there. We'll link that video too. And of course, if you enjoyed this video, feel free to comment below. Like the video on YouTube. And if you haven't yet subscribed to the channel, please consider subscribing. And of course, share the video around if you enjoyed it and think this message is important as much as we do. And Shkoyach Yitzi.
Koyach Tuvia, Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, and Emetz Hashem. We'll talk again next week. Parashat Noach.